Greetings and welcome to another edition of Political Empire. I'm your host, Kim Pierceall, and we are here to give you all the latest political news happening here in our great Inland Empire. And first off, a few news flashes. The courts have decided Assemblyman Kevin Jeffries will be able to keep his label of small business owner on the ballot, but he won't be able to imply that his opponent in the supervisorial race for Riverside County supports raising taxes. So there was that distinction. He is a small business owner according to the ballot, but he cannot imply that his opponent, Bob Buster in this case, supports raising taxes. So we've got that news. Also, mark your calendars, April 19th is when Ann Coulter is going to be appearing live with Hugh Hewitt, who's a local news talk radio host at the National Orange Show Event Center in San Bernardino. 5:30, they're going to be having a little mingling event with candidates, a Meet the Candidates hour. And at 7, I believe, is when they're going to be starting the show. So tickets cost about $25 or $30, depending on if you're VIP or just regular admission. So keep an eye out for that if you are interested in knowing more about what they're going to talk about politics-wise. And we have a very special guest in the studio today. Usually you only see him live via phone from Sacramento, but Jim Miller, our expert in all things Sacramento politics, is here with us today. Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Thanks, Kim. Glad to be here.
And you have a fun story because for the first time ever, and granted we knew this was coming, for the first time in our primary system, we are going to have a top 2-tier process where the top 2 vote getters in this primary are going to go to the November general election. So we could ostensibly have a Democrat running against a Democrat, a Republican running against a Republican in the November. What does this mean for voters?
Correct. Right. This was something that was put on the ballot by the legislature in February 2009. Voters approved it in June of 2010. And there are a number of races around the state where, based on the candidates on the ballot, where it's a certainty that there will be both Democrat versus Democrat and also Republican versus Republican races in the fall. Here in inland Southern California, the 67th Assembly District, kind of centered around Lake Elsinore, that will be Republican versus Republican. And more than likely in the 35th Congressional District up in Fontana, Rialto area, that will be Democrat versus Democrat.
And what does it mean for candidates, too? Because this is new to them. It sounds like some of them are even ditching their political affiliation in this race. Is that right, because of this?
Yeah, I mean, you talk to campaign experts and professionals out there, and no one is quite clear how this is going to work out. But there are, in the 8th Congressional District, you have Anthony Adams, who used to be a state assemblyman, and he was a registered Republican. He recently re-registered as no party preference, and that's how he's running. I think his strategy is, under this new top 2 system, he will appeal to Democrats and people who don't have a party preference and maybe end up in the top 2 that way.
And why the change in the first place? So they, I think, voted on this about 3 years ago. It's just now taking effect this year. Why make the change?
Right. This was approved by the legislature, put on the ballot by the legislature in 2009, February 2009. That was a time when state budget was about to run out of cash, and the top 2 primary was having a top 2 primary was part of the negotiations. And so in addition to approving some temporary taxes and some spending cuts, they also approved putting a top 2 primary on the ballot. Voters approved it in June 2010. It's been in place for a couple special elections since then, but this is the first time it's going to be in place for the entire state.
Some of the candidates that you spoke to for your story didn't seem too pleased with the new primary system, and in particular, Joe Baca called it a, quote, kangaroo primary. Any idea what he meant by that?
Yeah, I'm not totally clear. I mean, I think that's just another way of saying what some other candidates and professionals have said, that it's maybe going to be a free-for-all, and no one's quite sure how it's going to work out. So I think that's what he meant.
And we'll be watching to see what happens as well. It should be interesting, and of course you'll be covering the primary very closely. We're going to be having actually a live show that night on June 5th for the primary coverage to tell you all what some of the updates are and who's winning races. So keep an eye out for us. And Jim, thanks so much for joining us, and have a safe trip back to Sacramento.
Thanks, Kim.
And we'll be right back with John Hill and Alicia Robinson, who are going to be talking about gadflies and their interaction in local politics. Welcome back to Political Empire. We're going to shift to local politics because, as I say, all politics is local, and there are usually some pretty big, contentious rifts between active citizens and the city governments that they live in. We're going to talk about an instance in Southwest Riverside County as well as one in Riverside. And with us from our Southwest Riverside County Bureau is John Hill. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, Kim. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. We have a lot of active citizens who usually attend a lot of council meetings, get very involved and so forth, and sometimes that can lead to contentious encounters at those city council meetings, people being called out during speeches and so forth. Wanted to talk to you about an instance recently where a city clerk in Menifee had been recording phone calls that were coming from residents, calling, seeking records or information and so forth. And in California, of course, you can't record the other person on the phone. It's against the law without telling them that they're being recorded. So one, why was she recording them? And two, how did we find out that she was recording them?
Yeah, so this happened in Menifee, and the city clerk, Kathy Bennett, recorded 2 phone calls with a local resident activist. She calls herself named Ann Pica. And the calls were, Ann Pica was working as part of a citizens group that was drawing up some council district maps. And apparently the conversations got pretty heated. The city clerk was supposed to be, was helping draw up agendas for the group, and some of the conversations got pretty heated over things including whether or not the city logo should be on the agenda and where the group was allowed to meet and when they were allowed to meet. Some kind of small stuff, but apparently the calls got pretty heated according to the city clerk, and she decided to record a couple of calls. She said to protect herself. She said she was being bullied, and even that there was a group of people on the in the background of one of the calls who were basically egging Ms. Pica on to bully the city clerk.
So it sounds like there's certainly some history to all of this, that it isn't just one instance, but there's been quite a bit of back and forth between the residents and the city government. Yeah,
there's been a lot of incidents, and there's the city council meetings get really ugly sometimes, and there's name calling and that sort of thing. Recently, the city decided to start keeping track of who was making public records requests because they were getting a lot of records requests, and some of the city activists didn't like this, thought this was a violation of their right to get records.
And as far as this most recent incident with the recording of phone calls, what did the citizen activists obviously think of that, of their phone calls being recorded without their knowledge?
Well, obviously they're not very happy about it, and Pica says she's going to talk to the district attorney because, as you say, in California, it's what's known as a two-party consent state where everyone in a private conversation has to agree to be taped. The city kind of disputes that she did anything illegal, saying that, well, because there were other people listening in the background of the call wasn't really private. But, of course, that doesn't dissuade Ms. Pica from being mad that she was recorded without her knowledge.
Well, as the world turns in Menifee, John, thanks so much for the update on what's been going on, and certainly keep us posted as this back and forth continues between the citizens of Menifee as well as the Menifee city government.
Sure thing. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And we're going to come right back with Alicia Robinson, our Riverside reporter, who's going to talk a little bit about the back and forth that goes on between residents in Riverside and the city government there as well. Welcome back. We were just catching up with John Hill in our Southwest Bureau about what's been going on between the citizens of Menifee and Menifee city government. And now, live and in studio, we have our reporter Alicia Robinson, who covers the city of Riverside, to talk to us a little bit about what's been going on in Riverside that's a bit similar, this contentious atmosphere between the citizens, the residents of Riverside, as well as the city government. So tell us, what's been going on? It sounds like it's been escalating in the past few months.
Yeah, I would say so, because I go to pretty much every single city council meeting. We've had a little bit of an escalation of some of the rhetoric that the residents have been making comments about at the council meetings, some voices raised at the council meetings. Now, on the city council side, nobody's been yelling at the residents, but I think maybe some of the constant criticisms are starting to irk them a little because they've started responding a little more often.
And they've started responding in an official capacity too, correct? So the city manager has started a blog addressing some of these questions that keep getting brought up at city council meetings?
Right, that's true. He started a blog a few weeks ago, the city manager Scott Barber did, and some of the topics that he has addressed were some questions about some bonds that the city issued, and he also put out what's essentially a press release about some financial reporting award that the city had gotten and things like that. And when I spoke with Mayor Loveridge about it, he described one of the functions of the blog is to be sort of a truth squad on some of the claims that the critics were making.
Now, some of the citizens themselves have their own blogs that are reporting on the happenings within the city of Riverside, but there's a claim recently that if people were to go look up those blogs at the Riverside Public Library downtown, they weren't able to access those blogs. Were the blogs being blocked? Do we know what's going on?
Well, I didn't experience this personally, but a couple of the critics several of them do have blogs on which they discuss in detail some of their criticisms of the city, and they claim that somebody had tried to access the blogs at one of the libraries and was denied access. So after they brought this up, apparently the situation was pretty quickly corrected, although I haven't been able to quite get to the bottom of whether this was something that was just a mistake by IT or if it was something that was purposely done and then someone realized, oh wait, that's not what we're supposed to be doing.
And you're going to be looking into this back and forth between the city and its residents in an upcoming article, is that right?
That's right. I'm working on a story now.
Fantastic. Well, keep an eye out for it in the Press Enterprise. Alicia, thanks so much for joining us today, and thank you for joining us for yet another edition of Political Empire. And keep posted on all the political happenings here and in your city by checking PE.com regularly.